Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to another episode of Buha's Block. On today's show, we're going to be doing a mailbag. It has been a minute since we've done one, so wanted to tap in with you guys and ask you for your questions. So I will be pulling some questions from YouTube, some questions from X, and covering a lot of different topics. And we're going to start with some heat right away because I'm going to be talking about how deep I think the Lakers could go in the playoffs and how I view them in terms of contention. But before we get started, you guys know the drill. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. With all that said, let's get into the mailbag. The first one is from @Bobo_BBS from YouTube. Thank you for the dedication. It's nice to see the community grow. I think that this squad is good enough for a deep playoff run. Do you? Also, that we cannot afford any injuries regardless of who we waive and sign. And then I'm going to loop in a second question from YouTube from Alil Atif 25. I have not been this optimistic with the Lakers since the 2021 season. How do you feel about the playoffs this year? Also, when is Reaves up for an extension? So we got like 3 or 4 questions in here. I'm going to answer each one in order. So first one, do I think this squad is good enough for a deep playoff run? Yes, I do. Entering the Lakers-Nuggets matchup, I'd been talking about it on here that I felt like the Lakers were, as currently constructed, the 5th best team in the NBA. And if we were doing a power rankings of like championship contenders, I would have the Lakers number 5. And I've officially moved them up to number 4. Ahead of the Denver Nuggets and behind only the Boston Celtics, Oklahoma City Thunder, and Cleveland Cavaliers. In that order for me, I'm still giving Boston the nod as the defending champs. OKC's having a historic season. Cleveland is well positioned to go on a deep run and at least make the Eastern Conference Finals. Then I think it'll come down to how they match up with Boston, and that's probably a 6 or 7 game series. So I think those 3 teams right now, I have the most confidence in making the conference finals in their respective conferences. I think for the Lakers, it might be a little bit matchup dependent. I would like to see a couple more games against Denver before I like right now I'm putting them ahead of Denver because I think they have more versatility with their lineups, and I just trust Luka and LeBron to be able to problem solve in the playoffs. Of course, Jokic and his track record, but I think the Lakers have a couple of those guys now compared to just one in Denver. So I'm giving the Lakers the benefit of the doubt, and I'm also looking at the past 18 games. And I talked about it in the post-game stream, but over the last 18 games, the Lakers are 14-4, which is the best record in the NBA over that span. They have the number 1 defense, the number 8 offense, and the number 3 net rating. So they are right there. During that stretch, they've beaten the Celtics, the Nuggets, the Knicks, the Clippers, the Pacers, the Warriors a couple times, and they've done that with AD and Max, with just Max, without either one of those guys. With Luka, they've had a bunch of rotation guys added out of the lineup. They've played different styles of game plans. They've gone bigger. They've gone smaller. They've beaten different types of opponents. They've won on the road. They've won basically every big game over this stretch. And I think 18 games is nothing to scoff at. Of course, it's not the biggest sample size, but it's also not a small sample size either. Like we have basically a third of the season with the Lakers looking like this. And in my opinion, the deeper you go in the regular season, like those games matter more. And as we saw with the 2023 group, like that group finished the season, 17-7, and then or 18-7, and then they go into the playoffs with a lot of momentum. They end up making the conference finals. So it feels like this group is preparing for that type of run. So deep playoff run for sure. I mean, I've been saying for a couple weeks now that, post Luka trade, that like I think this is a group that can certainly make the conference finals, if not finals, and potentially win the championship. I think if I'm ranking them number 4, that is a championship contender, and I fully believe this group is capable of winning a championship with the way that they're playing on both sides of the ball right now. So are they good enough to make a deep playoff run? Yes. Now, the second part of this, Can they not afford any injuries regardless of who they waive and sign? Yes, I do agree with that. I think the Lakers have a clear top 8 right now, which is the starting 5 of Jaxson Hayes, LeBron James, Rui Hachimura, Austin Reaves, and Luka Doncic, and then Dorian Finney-Smith, Jared Vanderbilt, and Gabe Vincent. I think if they lose any of those 8 players, they don't have a guy who can sub in. Like, maybe you could talk me into Jordan Goodwin. Maybe they convert him at the end of the season and like he could take on some of the Gabe Vincent role. I think Gabe's probably the most expendable of the 8, but Gabe has been playing a critical role for this group. I'm not trying to diminish Gabe's value. I'm just saying if we're looking at the top 8, like who's the guy that they can probably find? Could they get some Jordan Goodwin minutes or Shake and Cam? I start to get a little worried. Even Dalton, like it's not great, right? So that's where I come back to, like, I think they need the top 8. And if the top 8 can be healthy, I really think this group can go big, can go small, can go kind of big and small at the same time by throwing out multiple wigs out there around LeBron and Luka and Austin. Like they really need the top 8. Is my point. So yes, to your question, like I think they need to stay healthy, particularly with the top 8. I don't think they have much room for error or depth, honestly, outside of that top 8. Maybe Jordan Goodwin could emerge as that 9th guy and they convert him later in the season, but that has yet to happen. So for now, I don't really trust anyone outside of the top 8. And then as for the second question, it was along the same lines in terms of asking how optimistic I am. I would say this is the most optimistic I've been this deep into a Lakers season since that 2020-2021 season. That group had a legitimate chance to repeat and defend their championship, if not for injuries to AD and LeBron in the regular season, and then AD again in that first round series against Phoenix. So I feel better about this group than I did about the 2023 group. I think we thought that group maybe could win a round, but I don't think we saw them going on that conference finals run necessarily, or at least I didn't. I thought there was still some flaws within the rotation with that group. And then on the Austin front, so Austin is eligible for an extension as of July 6th, 2025. And then he can sign that extension all the way up to the first day of the regular season. We don't know the schedule yet for next season, but it's typically late October, somewhere in that like October 20th to like 23rd range, something like that. So whenever that date is, Austin can sign an extension up until the final day before the regular season starts. But how I expect this to play out is the Lakers will make their contract extension offer to Austin on July 6th or sometime around then. And they will offer him, it's about, my understanding it's about like 4 years, 88 million-ish, 90 million, somewhere in that range, which if you average that out is about 22, 23 million per year on an annual basis. That is below Austin's market value. Austin, I mean, the way he's played the last 2+ months, he's clearly a high 20s, if not like $30+ million a year player. So I suspect the Lakers will make the affordable offer of an extension and say, hey, this is the most we can offer. Here's 4 years, 88, 4 years, 90, whatever the final number ends up being. We would love for you to sign this and remain a Laker for the foreseeable future. I would expect Austin to decline that and to not sign that extension and then opt out after the 2025-26 season. But he's got a player option for 2026-27. So I think in that 2026 summer, he will opt out. He will test free agency and then he will try to re-sign with the Lakers and remain a Laker long term, but it's going to come down to what type of contract they offer him. And I think with the way he's played the last 2+ months, the way he will likely play the rest of this season and into next season, he's a guy who should be making at least 27, 28+ million, if not 30+ million moving forward. So I think for the Lakers, like you got to make the contract offer and hope he takes it, right? But I would be shocked if Austin ends up taking that. That is below his market value. He's already making less money than he should be, even based on when he signed the contract at the time. Teams are just afraid that they were going to waste their time and offer him 100 and the Lakers would just match that, which would have been like 25-ish million annually, depending on how they structure the contract. So I think Austin is in line for like 4 years, 120+ million. and signing a 4-year 88, 90 million, like that would be a short-sighted, illogical decision. So I think Austin is going to get that extension offer. He's going to decline that. He's going to opt out in 2026, and he's going to get a bag, likely from the Lakers, but potentially, if not from them, someone else. I think that he will have multiple suitors trying to get him in that 120 plus range. So that is my understanding and read on the situation with Austin. Next question from @SamJensen9351 on YouTube. What playoff matchups should Lakers fans be rooting for? Personally, I think we need to cheer big time for the Grizzlies and obviously have a good record ourselves. So that way the Lakers and Grizzlies are the 2 and 3 seeds and the Nuggets are the 4 seed. That way we only have to play the Thunder or the Nuggets, not both. I agree with Sam's logic here. I think the ideal way for this to play out for the Lakers is the Thunder are obviously going to be the number 1 seed. And I think the Lakers actually match up decently well with the Thunder. I still would pick the Thunder against the Lakers as currently constructed head to head. I'd like to see they play a couple more times this season. I would like to have a little bit larger of a sample size and see what the current matchup looks like with Luka involved, with Chet back, etc. But until we see that, I'm going to slot, like, I think the Thunder have a historic net rating right now, and I don't want to overlook that. I've made the comparison that I view them similarly to last year's Celtics, and right now I would make them the favorite in the West. And so for the Lakers, I think the ideal seed to be is 2 or 3, ideally number 2, so you have the home court advantage over the 3 seed if you potentially face them in the second round. But either way, I think being 2 or 3 is better than being 4 or 5. Of course, between 4 and 5, you'd rather be 4, so you have home court advantage in that first round. If I'm the Lakers, the perfect bracket, I think, would be OKC 1, Lakers 2, Memphis 3, and Denver 4. So now you have Denver playing, maybe even Denver 5 and Houston 4. So that makes that 4-5 matchup tougher for Denver. Then if they survive that, then they play OKC in the second round. Now those 2 teams are going head to head and only one of them could survive. And then you play them in the conference finals. In terms of specific opponents, I agree with you that I think Memphis is on the easier side of LA match. I mean, I think if we're looking at the top 5, I would probably rank them in terms of best to worst matchup. I would probably go Memphis 1, Houston 2, Denver 3, OKC 4. That would be how I would rank the other 4 top 5 teams in the West. In terms of looking at the rest of the conference and like who the Lakers could potentially see in the first round or maybe even the second round, I would like the Kings and the Suns, I think, are both good matchups for LA because of their defense and the lack of rim protection and just some of the let's say drama and just kind of chaos that has happened with those 2 respective teams and their seasons. So of course, if there was a way for Sacramento or Phoenix to like earn the 7 seed and LA plays them in a 2-7 matchup, I think that would be ideal. Between the Clippers, the Timberwolves, the Mavericks, and the Warriors, those are all 4 good teams. Like there's no cakewalk in the West. Clippers, it's like, is Kawhi healthy? And what version of him are you getting? With Minnesota, it's a group that just made the conference finals, has a top 10 guy in Ant, and they have size and physicality. Dallas, I think it comes down to like AD and Lively and Gafford and like the health there. But AD and Kyrie in a playoff series, like, yes, you'll get a certain level from Luka and LeBron. It'll be a dramatic storyline, right? There would be a lot of narratives in that series. But that fully healthy, Dallas projects to be a pretty good team. And then Golden State with Jimmy Butler, they're 5-1 with Jimmy, and they have this new energy and vigor to them. I guess if I had to rank those, I'm assuming Dallas is healthy. If Dallas isn't healthy, and I think you probably bake that into the rankings, maybe Dallas is the easiest matchup. You're going to get the motivated Luka. So I'd say Dallas is maybe the easiest. Warriors number 2, Wolves number 3, Clippers number 4. I guess with the Clippers, like I think they can go small and match the Lakers in that way. It also depends what Kawhi you're getting. Like I don't really know how to order those 4. Maybe it's Minnesota. I think all these teams are relatively close. I think you can make an argument for the Clippers, the Wolves, the Mavericks, or the Warriors being the easiest matchup. I would say Dallas, I don't know. Now that I'm kind of talking through it, I might say Minnesota, just because I think LA has the defenders to throw at Ant, and I don't fear Gobert or Randall in a playoff series in general, but also specifically if I'm the Lakers, and I think I could play some of those guys off the floor, or like you could go with Rui. You could probably get away with Rui and Jackson and DFS and Vando like in that series. Whereas the Clippers, I'm actually more afraid, honestly, of Ivica Zubac and how his game translates through the playoffs. You got Kawhi. Dallas, you got the monster front line of AD, Gafford, and Lively, and Golden State. I think that's also on the easier side just because of the big man situation, although Jimmy and Steph together should be a pretty lethal duo. So I'm kind of actually leaning Minnesota, I guess, being potentially the easiest matchup for LA. There's some shooting concerns with them as well, but all these teams are really tough. They're really close together, and I would probably lean Minnesota or a banged up Dallas as the best matchups for the Lakers in terms of these like lower seed threats. Next question from @Addy20054 on YouTube. Where do you currently stand on the quote DFS should start over Rui end quote take and starting lineup in general? Do you think they should start both Rui and DFS? I still am on the side of starting DFS over Rui, and I know that sounds a little crazy coming off of the game that Rui just had against Denver and the way he defended Jokic, the offensive impact he had. I would argue that there's no reason why he can't continue to have a similar offensive impact off the bench. I don't really think like he's still going to be playing with Luka. He's still going to be playing with LeBron. He's still going to be playing with Austin. They're still going to use him in the same ways. I don't really see sure, if he's playing a little bit less with the starting unit or like the core of it, and he's playing a little bit less in general, maybe some of those numbers are going to go down, but I think he could function similarly offensively off of the bench. And if anything, maybe play in some lineups where he gets a little bit more of an offensive opportunity and could pick on some bench units a little bit more. Though he does play a lot in general, so I still think he gets some of those reps, but I think you can make a case for that. I think the biggest thing is just the defensive side. And one thing I noted in my Lakers Nuggets post-game reaction was that this was a more advantageous matchup for Rui because Denver doesn't have wings who are going to test you in the same way that, say, Boston or OKC or the Clippers or the Warriors. They don't have those ISO guys in terms of a Tatum, a Brown, a Kawhi, a Jimmy Butler, those types, Jalen Williams, like those types of guys who can ISO you and take you off the dribble and are threats at all three levels to score. And the Lakers needing that type of wing defender. So with Jokic, it was like very simple. Battle him in the post, front him, be physical, be disruptive. And he had a very simple task that he executed at a high level, and he deserves his flowers for. But I've been making the case that I view Rui as more of a 5 defensively than a 3. And the way that the Lakers starting lineup is constructed and the way that they use him, he sometimes has to be that 3 defensively. And I just think that's too much of an ask for his skill set. I don't think he has the defensive toolkit from a physical and mental perspective to defend wings at the requisite level that the Lakers will need. And sure, you can keep him as a placeholder starter, and there will be some matchups where you insert DFS or Vando quickly. But I think the comparison I've also made recently is it kind of reminds me of the D'Lo versus Max argument of, do you go with D'Lo and you just load up the starting group with offense and also a guy who probably wants to start, views himself as a starter, and you kind of keep that dynamic as is? Or do you go with a player who brings something that the rest of the starters don't have? And with Max, it was point of attack defense. And with DFS, it is wing defense that, yes, they can get that from LeBron and from Rui to an extent. But with LeBron, I think you want him a lot in a helper role, as we saw in that Denver game and how effective he was. Also, I think you want to conserve his legs and his energy for the offensive end, where he is going to be needed, especially in the playoffs and in big moments. So, and I will bring up some numbers now from Cleaning the Glass and look at how DFS and Rui slot next to LeBron, Austin, and Jackson. I'm leaving Luka out only because it's been such a small sample size of just 4 games, but looking at the other 3 starters who I think are going to be mainstays and starters moving forward. And so I pulled up some lineup data here, so bear with me. I'm going to talk you through it quickly. So with Jaxson, Austin, and LeBron on, 3 of the 5 starters, and I have it here with AD, D'Lo, and Max off. Those are the 3 primary rotation guys that have been traded out. So looking at Jaxson, Austin, LeBron together, AD, D'Lo, and Max off, the Lakers are a plus 0.9 points per 100 possessions in 382 possessions. They are in the 30th percentile offensively, so they've been bad offensively, and they are in the 84th percentile defensively. They've been good defensively. Now I'm going to add Rui in, and I will put DFS off just to make sure I'm looking at those 4 specifically. No DFS in this. And so with Rui on and no DFS, no AD, no D'Lo, no Max, Rui with those 3, the Lakers have outscored opponents by 0.9 points per 100 possessions. So the same rate as with or without Rui. It's been 151 possessions, and they're in the 42nd percentile offensively, so they're a little bit better offensively, but the 74th percentile defensively, so they're a little bit worse defensively. So if we flip that and put DFS in and Rui out, and now we look at it, the Lakers are plus 5.8 points per 100 possessions. It is only 83 possessions, so almost half of the possessions of Rui. They still struggle offensively, though they are better than the Rui lineup. They're in the 47th percentile offensively, but they are in the 93rd percentile defensively, which is better than the Rui lineup and better than just those 3 together without adding in any other players. So to me, looking at the lineup data overall, like DFS is a plus minus monster. And the Lakers are always better with him on the floor. They had a significant uptick in small ball viability after adding DFS in a way that a lot of those lineups were Rui and LeBron at the 4-5 and then some guards. And those lineups really struggled through the first month and a half, 2 months of the season. Once they added DFS, those lineups took off. So I think DFS and his versatility, particularly on the defensive end, he could guard up, he could guard down, he could guard wings, he could guard bigs. The Lakers have even used him on guards. I would much rather have that player in the starting lineup. And again, it's no shade. Like, you can't even make the case that Rui is the better player, that Rui is the more important player, that Rui has been playing better than DFS. But when it comes to what that lineup specifically needs, I still think it's DFS's defensive versatility, ability to switch and guard bigs and guard wings better than Rui can. So again, it's no shade at Rui. It's just more so what I think they need in that lineup. And I just think DFS is the better defender, and I don't think it's disputable. I think you can make a case that Rui can guard centers better and execute like the Denver game plan better. So maybe if they face Denver again, you want to go with Rui, like I'm fine with that. But they're not playing Denver every single night, and there are going to be plenty of nights when they need a wing stopper. And I think playing those guys off the bench in DFS and Vando and playing them likely less minutes than Rui, there are going to be some nights I think that's problematic. And so for that reason, I would lean DFS over Rui. However, I do want to acknowledge how Rui's been playing. I think starting matters to him. And I think the Lakers, as of now, are not going to change the starting lineup. And this is going to be the lineup moving forward for the foreseeable future. So with that context, I'm okay with it. I think Rui complements Luka well. I think Luka can unlock a lot for him, similar to the way LeBron has unlocked a lot for him. And I think they could get by. Like, they have been successful defensively with Rui on the floor. I still think the lineup data suggests it's more so with DFS on the floor, and he's been more important and just more impactful and more vital to the success that they've had more recently. But if it doesn't seem like that's going to change. So if Rui's going to be the starter, ultimately I'm okay with it. I don't agree with it. I think there's a better way to structure this rotation. At the same time, they're getting the results with Rui as a starter. So on some level, I understand. I don't fully agree, but on some level, I understand. Next one from @springmagic-po2yj from YouTube. No one saw that coming, but they've been playing better with no AD, even on defense. Why do you think that's the case? Like, everyone was screaming, we're done if AD goes down, even for a few games, and now we're actually doing better. What made us all think that way, and what has actually happened? There's a lot to unpack with this question. I would like to see a larger sample size without AD, but as I noted on X, for those who follow me there, so over this 18-game stretch where the Lakers had the best record, best defense, top 3 net rating, top 8 offense, AD did not play in 11 of those 18 games, so he only played in 7 of them, and in one of those, he left early. That was the Philly game where he got injured. He suffered the ab injury and left after playing 9 minutes in the first quarter. So essentially, the Lakers have had the league's best defense and been winning all these big games with AD only available for a third of those games. And of course, they lost the Philly game, but it's been kind of wild to see that they beat the Knicks, they beat the Clippers, they beat the Warriors, they beat the Nuggets, like all without Anthony Davis. And I think the biggest thing, and guys have kind of talked about this more on the offensive end, but you will see sometimes when in the past, when LeBron or AD was out, you saw a certain level of energy offensively and ball movement and other guys stepping up. Like sometimes it would go from being a more top heavy offense where like 2 or 3 guys are the primary scorers, primary shot creators, to now all of a sudden it's like 5 or 6 guys. And everyone knows that without one of the big dogs, everyone has to step up offensively. And some guys are going to take more shots. Some guys are going to score more. Some guys are going to handle the ball more. And so I think that has been an important part of LA's offensive success this season without LeBron or AD at various points. And then now, like Luka's out in the Portland game and they win that one. So I think there is something to like this group sometimes collectively can step up when one of the stars is down. And I think we've seen, like, that's the offensive side, but I think we've seen it on the defensive side of guys have even talked about at times, like it's comforting knowing AD is back there. And I know if I get blown by or beat on the perimeter, I'm funneling that player into AD. Like a lot of their strategy last year was trying to funnel, like really over the last couple of years, was trying to funnel defenders into Anthony Davis. And so I think when you play a certain style and it could almost be a little bit passive and you're forcing guys to drive into AD and just relying so much on AD, when you remove that, and you put in a Jaxson Hayes, who is a good defender from like a mobility, he's a very versatile, mobile big man who could switch in a switching scheme and guard some quicker guards or wings, but he's not a rim protector. He's not a good defensive rebounder. And I think there's been a collective acknowledgement that everybody has to do a little bit more. So first and foremost, I look at LeBron James really setting a tone on that end. I think LeBron has been awesome defensively for going on about a month and a half, almost 2 months, really since the beginning of December. He's been like, ever since he took that break, when he came back, he's been awesome on that side of the ball. And sure, people could cherry pick clips or stretches of games where maybe he's not like he makes some mistakes, he doesn't rotate. It's not the highest effort, but more often than not, on balance, LeBron has been very, very good defensively and has been very versatile defensively in terms of guarding bigs, guarding wings. We saw him guard Jamal Murray and switch across multiple positions in that Denver game. So I think LeBron deserves a lot of credit. I think a couple other big parts of this have been DFS, the DFS trade, and just him becoming more acclimated and comfortable and really feeling more like a Laker than he did earlier in like late December, early January. Also getting Vando back. Like they basically got Vando back right before AD got injured. It was on that same trip, so they only played in a couple games together. I think Gabe has been a big part of it. I think Rui has stepped up in certain matchups, especially when he's playing center and has to battle with big guys inside. And I think Luka has actually come in and like there was the targeting in the Charlotte game, and I don't want to overinflate Luka's defensive value because there are some concerns on that end, but he's a big body. He's a good defensive rebounder. And as we saw in the Denver game, he's excellent at playing passing lanes. And that basketball IQ and court mapping offensively translates to the defensive end where he's really good as a help defender and playing passing lanes. He has quick hands, quick decision-making skills. And you saw he had 4 steals in that game and is averaging a steal and a half as a Laker. But I think there's been just a collective acknowledgement that everybody has to do a little bit more. Everybody has to buy in. There's no defensive savior behind them. And sometimes you see this, I think more so on the offensive end, where a team loses a star, a team loses a key player to an injury for an extended period. And then all of a sudden, multiple guys step up, and through the collective, they can replace that guy. I think you've seen that on the defensive end. I think it's rarer to happen on the defensive end, but the Lakers have done that. And also not just without AD, without Max too, because remember, Max was a starter consistently playing 30 plus minutes a night before he got traded. He was their primary point of attack defender with the starting group and was playing an important role there. So I think losing Max and AD, it's been clear that like, DFS has to do more. Vando has to do more. Gabe has to do more. LeBron has to do more. Rui has to do more. Jaxson, you're the last line of defense. You're the primary rim protector. You have to do a bit more. And I think Jackson's been better as a rim protector and as a defense rebounder. So I think it's just been like everybody collectively, that top 7, top 8 has really stepped up defensively. I think another thing that I have to mention, I'd be remiss if I did not mention, was JJ and the coaching staff and the game plans. I think those have been on point. They have been opponent specific, and they've been able to really disrupt New York and the Clippers and the Warriors and the Nuggets going small and really like within the minutia, the details of the defense. They've been able to do some tweaks and really tailor it to each specific opponent and disrupt each specific opponent. So I think the coaching staff deserves a lot of credit. I think that the players have all stepped up, and that's why you've seen this group maintain, if not be even better defensively without AD. Now, I would like to see a larger sample size here, and the Lakers have 27 games remaining in the regular season. I would like to see what this looks like a week from now, 2 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now. Can they sustain this? I think that's an entirely different question, and it's going to require a certain level of effort and energy and focus and awareness and execution from this group and just competitive stamina from this group for the next month and a half or so until the playoffs. And I think they could do it. Just to be clear, I think they could do it. They're just like, they have to do it. And they're also going to have to do it against one of the toughest remaining schedules in the NBA. So that is one of the factors that is going to be at play. And they can't get discouraged if they drop a couple of games to good teams. Like they have to maintain this perspective, this mentality the rest of the way. And if they do that, I think they have a good chance to be the number 2 seed and position themselves very well to make the conference finals. And if they don't, and they slip up a little bit, they could still go on that type of run. But I think it's going to be a little bit harder as like the 5 or the 6 seed. So a lot will be determined in the next 6 weeks and how they approach things. And I think it all starts with the defensive end, outside of health, right? But the defensive end to me is going to determine this group's ceiling and where they ultimately fall in the standings. All right, next question is from Twitter, at LakersAreRad. What is the biggest takeaway from the win against Denver? Well, I've touched on the defense a lot, so I'm not going to focus on that as much. I think Denver will make some tweaks to their offense, how it functions, how it flows, the way that they try to attack the Lakers, different spots on the floor to put Jokic, different ways to use him. So I think Denver will come out with their own adjustments, but I think the Lakers showed a commitment to the game plan and an ability to also execute the game plan at a high level that I think we'd had some questions about that, especially in the Luka era, like what that would look like. And now I think that was a big answer, a big convincing, decisive answer from the Lakers defense. Now, the other big takeaway though, and this is arguably the biggest takeaway from me, is it's not that Luka's good or great or elite, as for some people seem to now be opening their eyes. And I think it's been funny to see the Luka discourse. And look, for those, I've been consistent the whole time. Like, don't give up on Luka. He's going to figure it out. He's going to look like himself. He needed some time to get his legs back, to get back into better shape. It's still a process. It's still going to take a little bit more time, I think, maybe for him to be at a consistent level of what he's capable of. But aside from the silly Luka discourse and the Lakers' defensive potential, I think the biggest takeaway for me was just how great this offense can be. And it wasn't even that complicated. It was a lot of just high pick and roll with Luka targeting Jokic or Murray, some double drag actions and some simple 2 and 3 man actions. And they were able to just ping the ball all over the floor and get whatever they wanted. And I think sometimes we focus on what players can't do or what lineups can't do. And I know I'm guilty of it sometimes as well. But looking at this starting group, you have 2 elite, top 5, top 3 playmakers in Luka and LeBron. So already you have a certain level of playmaking, passing, shot creation, basketball IQ, court mapping, court vision, all that stuff. Two elite supercomputers, as JJ likes to call them, who can operate on and off the ball. They can run pick and roll together. They can run pick and roll individually. One of those guys can be a second side creator. Like, you just have limitless possibilities with Luka and LeBron together. And then your number 3 guy is Austin Reaves, who has been doing like 85% of what those two guys can do over the past 2 months as a guy consistently putting up 20 plus points and 7 plus assists for this group. And we've seen him have obviously much bigger performances. So that's your number 3 guy who he could run a pick and roll, and he could get to the rim. He could generate a mid-range shot. He can hit, step back, and pull up threes. He can get to the free throw line. He can create for his teammates with creating lobs or dump off passes or driving kicks. And he's become a much better passer and playmaker in Austin. So you have 3 of those guys together. Then you have 2 good finishers in Jaxson and Rui. With Jaxson, it's the rim running, it's the vertical lob threat. He has excellent chemistry in the pick and roll with LeBron and with Austin, and it has been growing with Luka, and Luka has been getting him some easy buckets through their first few games together. Then you have Rui, who is a stellar spot-up shooter and catch-and-shoot guy, but also we've seen with those baseline cuts and his timing and his chemistry, especially with LeBron, but also it is blossoming now with Luka. He's another guy who's going to make you pay if you ignore him, especially with those baseline weak-side cuts. So I just don't know. And I would say like Rui is clearly the worst, I would say, passer and decision maker of that lineup. I think he's gotten better with those things. Like Jaxson to me is a very underrated playmaker and decision maker when he has the ball in his hands. I think people view him as like a limited offensive player, but I actually think he can make some reads and some passes in the short roll and even just like kind of the ball pinging around. He can find the open guy. But you just have like a combination of playmaking and passing and then finishing that is very unique and very difficult to stop. And honestly, if you want to make the case for Rui remaining as a starter, like this is the offensive end. And so just looking at the way they dissected Denver's defense, yes, they will play teams that are better defensively, that are more athletic, that can switch better, that have some length and quickness and athleticism that can disrupt some of this stuff. But even then, having LeBron and Luka together, like you can't really stop both of them. You can't slow both of them. Most teams don't have the personnel to even match up with both of them. Then you're putting your 3rd best perimeter defender against Austin Reaves, who can cook that guy. And then you have Jaxson and Rui moving and cutting all over the floor and being able to finish over contact, draw fouls, whatever at the rim. Like that's a lethal 5-man combination offensively. And I think the way that lineup, and I just think that the way that the offense is going to function and the potential of the offense is like just an insane level. The Lakers' ability to just exploit any type of coverage, you can't blitz, you can't drop, and you could try to switch. I guess that's the best way to do it and goad them into taking a bunch of jumpers. That's the one thing they got to figure out is the switching offense. But I think they're going like, I think JJ's shown in adaptability and to be able to make adjustments to get better at that. That's probably the one weakness right now is like just the offense doesn't flow right against heavy switching teams. And I think that's something they need to work on. But outside of that, and again, I think it will get better, especially as Luka gets more acclimated. I think they could be the best offense in the league and a top 5, top 7 defense. And that combination historically means you are a bona fide championship contender. And that's where I have the Lakers right now. And then next question from @DJ_Martinez with 3 Z's. This is a question from X. Who do you think is in the playoff 9-man rotation, and what are the key battles for the number 8 and number 9 spots? I think this is pretty straightforward. As I mentioned at the top, I think the Lakers have a clear top 8 of the starters plus DFS, Vando, and Gabe. I think that's the indisputable top 8. And those guys will, as long as they're all healthy, will be part of the top 8 moving forward. And then I think looking at the playoff rotation, I would assume JJ probably just goes with those 8 and maybe uses a 9th man situationally. I would look at Dalton Connect, obviously, with his shooting and the way that he's been used over the last couple months in terms of like on balance, he's typically been the quote unquote ninth man, though there have been some exceptions. I would also look at Jordan Goodwin, and if the Lakers end up converting him, depending on how the rest of the season goes, depending on how he continues to play, depending on what they feel like is their biggest need, maybe he gets converted, and I think he has a shot to be the ninth man. Maybe if the Lakers are in a series against OKC or Memphis or Houston or Denver and they need a second big, maybe we see them convert Koloko or Jemison, or maybe we see them dust off the cobwebs with Alex Len. I don't, as I've said, like I don't really think Len is rotation caliber right now, especially in a playoff setting. I would much prefer a Koloko or Jemison, but the issue is they already signed Len and they can only sign one more player, so they kind of have to pick between potentially adding a big or adding Jordan Goodwin, who's been playing really, really well. So that's something they're going to have to figure out. And there's still the possibility, we got a week left, or less than a week left, until March 1st for a potential buyout guy, in terms of like that player has to be bought out before March 1st to be playoff eligible. So we'll see if any guys become bought out basically by the end of this week, and then having a sense of like maybe the Lakers adding one of those types of guys. But I think it's probably going to be one of the two-way guys that they add at the end of the season. And it's really just, do they need that extra big because they're a little afraid of going into the playoffs with Jaxson and Len, or just Jaxson and Len? Or do they need a Jordan Goodwin? Like he's just playing so well that they need him as like that ninth man. So I think it's between Connect and Goodwin, but I would put it as like more of an 8.5 man rotation. I think those top 8 are going to all play 15 plus minutes. And maybe if they need a ninth guy, be it Dalton, Goodwin, or a big, that ninth player can play situationally. Next question from @purplegold4life-L60. Hi, Jovan, coming in from Switzerland. Shout out to Switzerland. Been following the channel since day one. Thank you. I appreciate it. Really appreciate and love the work you put in. My question is, I know you were a JJ guy when he was hired, but after which game were you convinced that you were right about he's a legit NBA coach? I like this question because it's interesting to kind of think through, like, when did JJ prove himself as a legitimately good NBA head coach? I would say like that part, I think you just need a larger sample size and you don't want to overreact or write a guy off or make too many proclamations about a guy. Like anytime I talked about JJ, it was more future looking of like, I think this guy can be a good coach this season, but like really it's about longer term. Like this is going to be a guy over the next few years, I think develops into an elite or at least very good NBA head coach. So I would say from like honestly the first, like the opening possession of the preseason when they ran that grenade action, the UConn action that got, I believe it was Austin in open 3. And it was just like the ball movement and the ball pinging around and the off-ball screening. Like it was all these things that we had talked about with last year's group and wanting with last year's group. And they run it on the first possession of the preseason. Like that showed me JJ was serious about all of this, right? And then looking at the Phoenix game and the way he reacted to his first loss and how upset he was, and really it's been a theme. Almost every loss, JJ has some type of like mic drop moment or getting upset about something. And like he takes every loss very personally and very hard. It's not really sustainable, but you know, I think that's part of what makes JJ who he is. But really, I think like early in the season, you saw the potential, I think, with the 3-0 start. They beat Minnesota on opening night. They beat Phoenix. They beat Sacramento. They start 3-0, best start in several years. And they beat Sacramento, who's a team that had their number for the past couple of years, specifically with the Sabonis AD whole situations. I thought at that point, it was like, okay, he's got really good buy-in. He's showing some things schematically that are encouraging. And I think he's making good on the potential. I think the Boston Golden State back-to-back wins were really the point where I was like, okay, like I think he's here. He's arrived. He's come up with like the problem solving, and even Golden State on Christmas losing AD and still winning that game. But like there's just a level of beating those two teams in the manner in which they beat them. And there was a clear buy-in from the group and a lot of talk about connectivity and just, you know, everyone playing hard and playing for each other. So I think like around that stretch was when it started to form like this dude is just like he's legit. Like there's no denying that he's a good NBA coach as constructed. He's above league average for sure. And then I think more recently, as we've had a larger sample size with this stretch, and really it started with that Miami game in mid-January, just JJ's game plans in the bigger games, like Boston, Golden State, New York, Clippers, Golden State, even Indiana without LeBron and Luka, and then most recently Denver, obviously. Like I just think the game planning has been awesome. He has outcoached some of the best coaches in the league and outmaneuvered and outthought. It had adjustments and counters ahead of them. It's certainly been within the last month that I've considered him like a good to really good head coach. I made the point last stream that I think he's a top 10 coach in the league. Now, I don't know if I'd go as far as to say top 5. I think I would like to see the rest of the season, see what it's like in the playoffs when he can really game plan for specific opponents over a 7-game series. And then we can start to have a different conversation in the offseason. So I don't want to prematurely anoint him as like the next Ty Lue or Eric Spoelstra or Joe Mazzulla or whatever. But like Mazzulla is kind of the one, like he's patterned a lot of his approach off of Mazzulla and Boston and all that. And like he's overexceeded expectations, I would say for sure in his first year. He's finding himself as a head coach. And I would say over the past month, it has really crystallized to me that he is a good to really good head coach. Next one from @JaredKelly03 on YouTube. Yo. Hey, Jovan, big fan of the channel. Given how well Jaxson Hayes has played lately, showcasing his high energy and versatility defensively, in parentheses, particularly when it comes to JJ's switching scheme, what do you perceive his market to be in the summer? Do you think it's something like 2 years, 10 to 12 million? Now, I don't know if you mean 10 to 12 million annually or 10 to 12 million total. So total would be the taxpayer MLE, which is at about 5.7 million per year. And then the second year is a little bit higher. So I want to say it's somewhere in that like 2 years, $13 million range. I think that's probably the starting point for Jaxson. I think depending on how the rest of the season goes, how the rest of the postseason goes, how he fares in those matchups, can he play 20 plus minutes a night in a playoff series? Can he close games occasionally for them in big spots? I think that will ultimately determine if he's looked at as even as high as like a non-taxpayer MLE guy. There is a widening gap right now in like player values, and with the Supermax and the first apron, second apron, and all the moving parts with all the financial side and salary side of things, I think there are guys who slip through the cracks, and I wouldn't be surprised if a guy like Jaxson, despite playing on the Lakers platform and being the starting center for them, if still there is some skepticism as to like, can he sustain this long-term moving forward? So I think a good starting point is probably a 2 or 3 year deal in that taxpayer MLE range, so maybe something like 3 years, 20, 21 million, 2 years, 13, 14 million, something like that, somewhere in there. I wouldn't be shocked if he continues to play this well and potentially even expand his role, as we've seen it slightly expanded in terms of minutes. And he could be a high, if he finishes the regular season over the final 35 games, averaging like 27, 28, 29 minutes a game, goes into the playoffs, is playing like 22 to 26 minutes a night, closing some games in big spots. I wouldn't be surprised if he maybe gets some non-taxpayer MLE offers and maybe some team offers him 333 or something like that, or somewhere in that range, about like 10 to 12 million annually. And that might've been what you were getting at. For now though, I would say he's more, in my opinion, more of a taxpayer MLE guy, which is in that like $5 to $7, $5 to $8 million range. So he's playing for a lot right now. Like he clearly has a place in the NBA. And I think that was a little bit shaky at like entering the second half of last season. I think second half of last season, he had a great close to the season. He had a bit of an up and down start to this season, and then has really emerged as a reliable, consistent player. And he still has some flaws. He still has some limitations, but the Lakers have found ways around it. I think he has also improved on some of those things, and he's been playing really good basketball. So he's a starting center on the Lakers, a team that many, including myself, think could make the conference finals, win a title. So if they win the title with Jaxson Hayes, like, he will likely be re-signed, and it'll likely be kind of in that range. So we shall see. Next one from @CamWSmith32 on YouTube. Yo, Jovan, what's good? Keep up the amazing content. Thank you. This season's been insane. What's it like to cover this team day to day? What are the lowlights/highlights? It has been an insane season, I would say, but even by Lakers standards. Like, I've talked about this before for those who've been listening and watching and following for a while. Like, covering the Lakers, like they are the NBA's soap opera novella. Just the insane things that happen, like, only to the Lakers and no other teams. Like, they get the Luka trade out of nowhere. They get the Mark Williams trade out of nowhere. Then they get the rescindment. Even go back to the Boston win. That was the same day that AD does the ESPN interview, is kind of calling out the team in the front office and saying he wants to play the 4 and wants another center. And, like, as you said, it's been insane to cover this on a daily basis. I feel like the last 3 or 4 years, every day I wake up just, like, expecting the unexpected. And it's like, what crazy thing could happen today or this week with the Lakers? And that honestly makes the job fun. Like, already it's a privilege to be an NBA reporter, to get to travel, to get to go to games for free, not even for free, getting paid to go to games and watch and have, sit where we get to sit and get the free media food and just all the perks that come with the job. And there's a lot of sacrifice in terms of personal time and personal life, and traveling basically every other week and missing, working holidays, working nights, working weekends, missed countless birthdays and parties and holidays with family and friends and all that stuff. So, like, there are certainly a lot of sacrifices and some downsides to the job, but it is a privilege and an honor, and it's very humbling to be able to do this job. So I do not take it for granted. I do not take it lightly. And then a huge thing for me recently over the past almost a year now has been this YouTube channel and this podcast and this show, and growing this out on YouTube and on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and on the audio side with Odyssey, and, like, just continuing to build this out and take this to a different level, and hopefully do this for the rest of my life, the rest of my career. So it's been great. Now, covering the team on a daily basis, like, there's a clear hierarchy in terms of, like, news and importance, and it always starts with LeBron. And then earlier, to a lesser extent, AD and JJ, and then I think the next level down, like Austin, and then the next level down is, like, everybody else. Like, this is a very news-heavy beat and team to cover. There's always some type of news. Like, basically anytime LeBron talks, there's some level of news or intrigue. Now, adding Luka in takes that to a different level, because he's not on the same level as LeBron from, like, a stardom perspective, but he's certainly at a higher level than Anthony Davis. And there's a lot of intrigue with Luka, especially with the whole Dallas storyline and him about to play Dallas. So there's a lot of interest with that. And now Luka's kind of entered that stratosphere of, again, not quite on the same level as LeBron from, like, a stardom perspective, because no one is arguably on the level of LeBron from a stardom perspective, but he's become a new central main character, clearly at worst the number 2, if not, like, the 1B. So that's changed some things. There's been a lot to cover with that trade, with the DFS trade, with the Mark Williams situation, with the Lakers' success during all of this. Like, there's been a lot of different storylines and narratives and just different really interesting things happening with this group. So that's been fun. That's been exciting. In terms of lowlights or highlights, the only thing I would say is, like, sometimes it does feel like the stuff happening off the court is more interesting than the stuff happening on the court, or not even necessarily more interesting, but there is more interest in it from the fan base or from the national audience or whatever. And sometimes there is a lot of focus on, like the whole Mark Williams situation has kind of taken away from, like, how well this team has been playing. And there's been a lot of, like, is the trade going to be overturned? Did the Lakers get cold feet? And what's happening with this whole situation? And it's like, I'd rather just be talking about the basketball, and I do have the platform to do that. And that's why I try to focus on that stuff more than some of the narrative or off-court drama or whatever. But that is a big part of covering the Lakers, is that stuff comes with it. And there's a certain interest and appetite for that. So I would say sometimes that stuff is fun. Sometimes that stuff can be boring. Sometimes that stuff can just be a little monotonous of like, okay, I've talked about this, I've covered this. So like another part of it is like the trade stuff can sometimes be fun. Sometimes it's like, you know, I feel like I'm only talking about trades when I do the Q&As and stuff. So I think some of that like non-basketball stuff can be a little much at times. In terms of highlights, I don't know where to start. Like, I mean, covering the Lakers, the most global franchise in the NBA, and arguably in American sports. Like when you really think about it from a global perspective, you put them against the Cowboys, the Yankees, the Celtics, the Red Sox, the Dodgers. Like, I think that the Lakers might have them beat just with how big they are in Europe and in Asia and just in other, South America, other pockets of the world. I think the Lakers have certainly an advantage against almost any other American team. So being able to cover that and know that there are people in other countries who know who I am because of that, like that's awesome. Getting to cover the back portion of LeBron's career has been a privilege. Now getting to cover Luka potentially for the second half of his career that's a privilege. Getting to cover JJ and like just that storyline has been fun. And then, interacting with the fan base. Like I've said it and I really believe it. Like I think the Lakers have the best fan base in sports, and sometimes they're misunderstood or get like a bad rap, but I've had largely positive interactions with the fan base, and I find them very knowledgeable, very passionate, and they got a good bullshit detector. And that's why they're constantly calling the Lakers and people around the Lakers all their bullshit. So I think that there's a lot of highlights. Like, this is a dream job. It's a dream franchise and team to cover. And lowlights, again, like another lowlight I would throw in is like the aggregation stuff of people just like to misinterpret or misconstrue my words and then use it for content. And that's honestly probably the biggest lowlight, is just people using my name for clout. Sometimes I don't really know how else to say it. Other than that, though, like the highlights far outweigh the lowlights, and it's been awesome to cover the Lakers. Final question is actually from two people asked the same question. It's a non-basketball question, so if you don't care about this, you could turn off the show or the pod right now. But N Comb Hoodie asks, off topic, but how did you feel about Drake and PND's new album? I'm biased, but I feel like it was pretty decent. And then on Twitter, Freddie Junior Lopez asked non-Lakers / basketball question, thoughts on the $$ for you, some sexy songs for you album. Keep up the good work, bro. So those who know me at this point know I am a Drake stan. Drake is my favorite artist. He's been my favorite artist since 2009. I have not missed a show in LA when he's been there since then. So I'm a Drake apologist, a Drake loyalist. It's certainly been a rough year, especially being in LA, but I have not switched sides. I have not switched up, and I've remained loyal. So in terms of my thoughts on the album, it has really grown on me. I always go through this weird thing with Drake where I don't love his projects at first, and like the first or even second listen, I'm kind of like, I've heard this before, or like, this is kind of like there'll be some standout songs, but I don't like love it. Then that like third, fourth, fifth listen, I inevitably fall in love with it. And then I really like understand the project, or it resonates with me on a different level. This one's quite simple. It is baby making music, and I don't know how else to put it. So I will not take it any further than that, especially on this platform. But if you like listening to some R&B and some sexy songs, some baby making songs, then I think this is the type of music for you. And that is what, like, I think if you take it for what it is, like people have been wanting him to make an R&B album for a long time, like either a rap album or an R&B like specific album. And he tends to mix in both. And even on this one, there's some rapping, but I thought like for everything going on with him, this was a pretty good project. Certainly some things I would maybe tweak or like, there's a couple skips for me, but for the most part, I think there are some gems here for sure. I think Nokia is a smash hit. I think Give Me a Hug. Die Trying is the one that's really grown on me that I did not like at first. And that one, I've seen some TikToks on it where people are like the first time listening to it, second time, and then you're like 10th time listening to it, and you can't stop. So I'm biased too, like Encombe Hoodie here. No matter what Drake puts out, I'm going to listen to it. I'm going to rock with it, and that's my dude, and he's been my dude for 16 years. And I think there are a lot more hits than misses. There are a lot more wins than losses. So I'm going to continue to ride with Drake. But that will do it for this episode. I got over 90 questions between YouTube and X, and I really appreciate it. I appreciate, like, I cannot answer obviously 90 plus questions. I answered about 11 today, and even within some of those questions, there were multiple questions. So I will be doing a second mailbag later in the week. So be on the lookout for that. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back on Tuesday night after Lakers Mavericks. Probably be a late one, just a heads up to the late night gang. I will probably, my assumption would be not going live until at least 11:30, if not closer to 12, just as a heads up. But we'll have a lot to unpack with Luka's first matchup with the Dallas Mavericks, all the emotion behind it and how their performance goes. It's a big game for the Lakers from a standings perspective, and I'll be going live to cover it all. I will talk to you then.